He disrespected Muhammad Ali's beliefs. What Ali did next in round 9 shocked the world. Blood trickled down Muhammad Ali's face as he retreated to his corner after round 8. Madison Square Garden vibrated with 20,000 voices, a deafening mixture of cheers and jeers that seemed to make the ring lights flicker. June 26, 1967. The heavyweight championship bout against Joe Frazier had taken an ugly turn when Frazier leaned in during a clinch in round 7 and whispered something that made Ali's eyes flash with a dangerous light. "You ain't no real Muslim, just a draft-dodging coward hiding behind that fake name." Ali's face had remained impassive, but his body had tensed like a steel spring. His trainer, Angelo Dundee, noticed immediately as he wiped sweat from Ali's brow between rounds. "No, what's got into you, champ?" Dundee asked, pressing a cold compress against a swelling under Ali's right eye. "Your rhythm's off. You're dropping your left." "What did he say to you?" Ali stared straight ahead, his chest rising and falling rapidly. The roar of the crowd seemed to fade away as he focused on a single point in space. The past year had been the hardest of his life. After converting to Islam and changing his name from Cassius Clay, he'd faced ridicule from the press, death threats from the public, and now the ultimate punishment, being stripped of his heavyweight title for refusing military induction based on his religious beliefs. The case was headed to the Supreme Court, but meanwhile he was fighting to reclaim what had been taken from him. "He's trying to get in your head," Angelo continued, snapping his fingers in front of Ali's face. "Don't let him. You're faster, smarter, the greatest. Remember?" Ali nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving that invisible point of focus. The lights of the arena caught the beads of sweat on his dark skin, making him look as if he were covered in tiny diamonds. Across the ring, Frazier sat on his stool, his team working frantically to reduce the swelling around his left eye, the result of Ali's precise jabs that had scored consistently through the early rounds. The relationship between the two fighters had once been friendly. When Ali was stripped of his title and his boxing license for refusing the draft, Frazier had supported him, even lending him money. But as Ali's case became a symbol of resistance against the Vietnam War and his popularity grew among anti-war activists, something had changed. The boxing establishment had positioned Frazier as the true champion, the patriotic counterpoint to Ali's controversial stance, and Frazier, feeling used and betrayed by Ali's subsequent taunts, had embraced the role. The bell for round 9 would ring in 20 seconds. Ali's corner team worked with practiced efficiency, checking his gloves, giving him water, applying Vaseline to his brow. The cut wasn't bad, but it was bleeding enough to concern Dundee. "Remember the plan," Dundee said urgently. "Stay outside. Use the jab. Don't let him get close enough to work your body." But Ali seemed to be listening to a different voice. His eyes shifted slowly from that invisible point to Fraser's corner. His breathing had slowed. The chaotic energy that had disrupted his legendary footwork in round 8 was transforming into something else, a cold, focused intensity that Dundee had only seen a few times before. The timekeeper's hammer struck the bell. The sound cut through the garden like a gunshot. Ali rose from his stool with unusual deliberation, not bouncing on his toes as he typically did. Across the ring, Fraser charged forward, eager to continue the body attack that had begun to slow Ali in the previous round. As the fighters met in the center of the ring, the crowd's roar reached a fever pitch. They sensed something had changed. The Ali that moved toward Fraser now was different from the one who had retreated to his corner minutes before. His eyes held a quiet fire that those in the front rows would later describe as almost frightening in its intensity. What happened next would become one of the most discussed moments in boxing history, a moment when the personal, the political, and the athletic converged in a display that transcended sport. Muhammad Ali, the man who had sacrificed everything for his beliefs, was about to show the world exactly what those beliefs had given him. Not weakness, as his critics claimed, but a strength few could comprehend. The crowd fell into an expectant hush as the two boxers circled each other at the beginning of round 9. Fraser, emboldened by his success in the previous round, pressed forward with his characteristic bob-and-weave style, looking to get inside Ali's longer reach. Ali, contrary to his corner's instructions, wasn't dancing away. He stood his ground, flat-footed, hands high but not moving with his usual flash and flair. Howard Cosell's voice crackled through millions of televisions across America. "Something's different about Ali in this round. He's not moving, not talking. This is not the Ali we've come to expect." The previous 8 rounds had followed a predictable pattern. Ali controlling the distance with his jab, occasionally landing crisp combinations, while Fraser relentlessly stalked him, absorbing punches to land his devastating left hook to the body. But round 8 had marked a shift, with Fraser finally trapping Ali against the ropes, landing several punishing blows that had the former champion in trouble for the first time in the fight. Now, as Fraser launched forward with a hooking combination aimed at Ali's midsection, Ali did something no one expected. He stood his ground and traded. The exchange was brutal and swift. Frazier's hook partially landed, but Ali countered with a straight right that snapped Frazier's head back, following immediately with a left hook of his own that momentarily froze the advancing champion. The garden erupted. This wasn't Ali's style. The man who famously proclaimed, "Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee," was now planting his feet and punching with Frazier, arguably the most devastating puncher in heavyweight boxing. In Ali's corner, Angelo Dundee was on his feet. "What are you doing?" he shouted, his voice lost in the roar of the crowd. "Stick to the plan." But Ali had a different plan now. As Frazier recovered and pressed forward again, Ali met him in the center of the ring. Their exchange was furious, hooks, uppercuts, and straight punches delivered with bad intentions. Ali was giving up his advantage in reach and speed to make a point that went beyond boxing strategy. In a rare moment of inside fighting, the two men were chest to chest, throwing short punches. The referee moved in close to monitor the action. That's when those at ringside heard Ali speak for the first time since round 7. "My faith gives me strength you'll never understand, Joe." Frazier responded with a grunt and a vicious hook to Ali's side. Ali absorbed the blow and fired back with a three-punch combination that drove Frazier backward for the first time in the fight. The dynamic was shifting visibly now. Asi, who had been circling away for most of the fight, was now the aggressor, walking Frazier down with measured steps and precise punches. At the 2-minute mark of round 9, Ali landed a straight right hand that seemed to buzz Frazier momentarily. Instead of following up with a flurry, as most fighters would, Ali stepped back slightly, creating just enough distance to unleash his most devastating combination. The sequence that followed would be studied by boxing trainers for decades. A lightning-fast jab that snapped Frazier's head back, followed by a straight right that landed flush on the chin. And then, as Frazier's hands dropped slightly, a left hook that connected with perfect timing and leverage. Frazier, who had never been knocked down in his professional career, staggered dramatically. His knees buckled, and for a moment, it appeared he would go down. The garden held its collective breath. Somehow, through sheer will, Frazier remained upright, grabbing onto Ali in a clinch to recover. The referee separated them, and Ali, now fully transformed, began to circle again, but not in retreat. His footwork, which had seemed labored in round 8, was now fluid and purposeful. He was cutting off the ring, trapping Frazier, reversing their roles entirely. "This is unbelievable," Cosell exclaimed to the television audience. Ali has completely changed his strategy. He's not just boxing Frazier now. He's fighting him at his own game and winning. With 30 seconds left in the round, Ali cornered Frazier against the ropes. What followed was a display of combination punching rarely seen in heavyweight boxing, a 10-punch sequence delivered with such speed and precision that Frazier could only cover up and absorb the punishment. When the bell rang ending round 9, Madison Square Garden was on its feet. Ali, instead of immediately returning to his corner as fighters typically do, stood in the center of the ring for a moment, his gloves raised not in celebration but in a gesture of quiet affirmation. Across the ring, Frazier was being guided to his corner by his trainers, his face showing the first signs of serious damage. In Ali's corner, Angelo Dundee had given up trying to redirect his fighter's strategy. Sometimes he knew a trainer's job was simply to witness greatness unfolding according to its own internal logic. "I don't know what got into you," he said as he worked on Ali's cuts. "But whatever it is, keep it going." Ali nodded silently, his eyes still focused on Frazier's corner, where a team of trainers was working frantically to revive their fighter for round 10. The fight had reached its turning point, but the most shocking moment was yet to come. The minute rest between rounds felt like seconds to Frazier's corner. His chief trainer, Eddie Fuchs, worked desperately to reduce the swelling that was now nearly closing his fighter's left eye. Across the ring, Ali sat calmly on his stool, his breathing controlled, his gaze unwavering. The contrast between the two corners couldn't have been more stark, one in crisis, the other in composed preparation. "He hurt you that round," Fuchs told Frazier bluntly, pressing an end swell against the fighter's swollen eye. "But he can't keep that pace. Make him pay for standing and trading. Work his body, Joe. Break him down." Frazier nodded grimly, his mouthguard gripped between his teeth, his breath coming in heavy bursts. He had weathered storms before. His entire career had been built on absorbing punishment to deliver his own. But something about Ali's transformation in round 9 had unsettled him. This wasn't the dancing, taunting Ali he had prepared for. This was something else entirely. The bell rang for round 10. Frazier charged forward with renewed determination, while Ali met him in the center of the ring with the same flat-footed stance he had adopted in the previous round. The crowd, still buzzing from the action of round 9, rose to a deafening roar as the fighters engaged immediately. Frazier, true to his corner's instructions, went straight to Ali's body, landing a thunderous left hook to the ribs that echoed through the arena. Ali winced visibly but didn't retreat. Instead, he countered with a straight right that caught Frazier coming in. The punch landed cleanly, stopping Frazier's momentum momentarily. For the first minute of round 10, the two men exchanged punishing blows in the center of the ring. Neither giving ground. They stood toe-to-toe in a firefight that had the crowd in a frenzy. This was heavyweight boxing at its most primal, two champions, each with a legitimate claim to the title, testing not just skill but will. Then, with approximately 2 minutes left in the round, Ali did something that would later be described as either tactical genius or psychological warfare. As Frazier backed him toward the ropes, Ali suddenly dropped his hands to his sides completely, his gloves dangling at his hips. His face, which had been a mask of concentration, broke into the familiar, taunting smile that had made him famous. "You can't hurt me, Joe," he said loudly enough for the first few rows to hear. "My God protects me." Frazier, seeing the opening, launched a massive left hook aimed at Ali's unprotected chin. Ali, in a display of reflexes that seemed to defy physics, swayed backward just enough for the punch to graze his jaw. Then, still with his hands at his sides, he countered with a straight right that caught Frazier flush and sent sweat spraying from his head. The garden exploded. Photographers at ringside scrambled to capture the moment. In the ABC broadcast booth, Howard Cosell was practically shouting into his microphone, "This is unbelievable." Ali is fighting with his hands down, taunting Frazier, and landing the cleaner punches. I have never seen anything like this in championship boxing. The psychological impact on Frazier was immediate and visible. The man known for his unwavering pressure suddenly hesitated, unsure how to approach an opponent who was breaking every conventional rule of boxing. Ali, sensing the shift, pressed his advantage. He began to circle again, but now with a predatory purpose, his hands still dangerously low. Frazier, frustrated and increasingly desperate, lunged forward with a wild combination. Ali slipped most of the punches and countered with a three-punch combination that landed with surgical precision. Frazier staggered backward and for the second time in the fight appeared to be in serious trouble. With 45 seconds left in the round, Ali cornered Frazier against the ropes again. This time, instead of unleashing a flurry, he placed his glove on Frazier's shoulder, almost gently, and spoke directly into his ear. What he said wasn't picked up by the microphones, but those closest to the ring saw Frazier's expression change from one of defensive determination to something approaching shock. As the referee moved in to separate them, Ali stepped back and, in a gesture that would become one of the most iconic images in sports history, pointed his glove directly at Frazier and then tapped his own chest twice, directly over his heart. The symbolism was clear to everyone watching. This fight had become about more than boxing. It was about conviction, about identity, about beliefs that ran deeper than any championship belt. The final 30 seconds of round 10 saw Frazier, still stunned by whatever Ali had said to him, fighting purely on instinct. His legendary pressure was gone, replaced by hesitant jabs and defensive maneuvers. Ali, in complete control now, picked his shots carefully, landing clean punches that snapped Frazier's head back repeatedly. When the bell rang, Frazier returned to his corner looking for the first time in his career, like a man questioning whether he wanted to continue. His face was badly swollen, blood trickled from cuts above both eyes, and his breathing was labored. In his corner, Eddie Futch looked concerned as he examined his fighter's injuries. Across the ring, Ali sat on his stool, barely breathing hard. He declined water, declined instructions from Dundee. His focus remained entirely on Frazier, watching as the champion's corner frantically worked to prepare him for round 11. The momentum of the fight had shifted completely. What had begun as a tactical boxing match, followed by Frazier's punishing inside work, had transformed into something that transcended conventional boxing. Ali was no longer just fighting for a championship. He was fighting for vindication, for his beliefs, for the right to be who he had chosen to become. As the timekeeper prepared to signal the start of round 11, a palpable tension settled over Madison Square Garden. Everyone present sensed they were witnessing not just a great fight, but a moment of cultural and sporting significance that would be remembered long after the final bell. What none of them could anticipate was that the most shocking moment was about to unfold. The bell for round 11 rang, its metallic tone cutting through the restless murmur of the crowd. Ali rose from his stool with fluid grace, his body showing none of the fatigue typically associated with the championship rounds of a heavyweight bout. Across the ring, Frazier pushed himself up with visible effort, his legs heavier, his shoulders slumped slightly forward. When the fighters met in the center of the ring, the contrast was striking. Ali moved with renewed lightness, almost bouncing on his toes again, while Frazier trudged forward, his characteristic bob and weave now more of a mechanical routine than the natural rhythm it had been in earlier rounds. For the first minute, Ali reverted to his classic style, dancing, jabbing, circling away from Frazier's dangerous left hook. The crowd, which had been stunned into relative quiet by the unexpected developments of rounds 9 and 10, began to come alive again, sensing that Ali was setting up something spectacular. "Look at Ali now," Cosell narrated to the television audience. "He's back to the style that made him champion, but there's a new dimension to it. He's not just evading, he's controlling every aspect of this fight. Frazier looks lost in there." With approximately 2 minutes left in the round, Ali backed Frazier into a neutral corner with a series of stiff jabs. Then, instead of following with a right hand as boxing convention would dictate, he lowered his hands again and began to speak. This time, his words were clearly audible to those at ringside. "You called me a fake Muslim, Joe, said I was hiding. But it takes more courage to stand for your beliefs than to throw punches. You know that now, don't you?" Frazier, trapped in the corner and clearly hurt, responded with a desperate lunge, throwing a wild hook that Ali easily slipped. Ali countered with a right hand that landed flush, sending Frazier staggering sideways along the ropes. What followed was one of the most clinical displays of boxing skill ever witnessed in a heavyweight championship fight. Ali, now in complete control, began to pick Frazier apart with combinations thrown from angles that seemed to defy the geometry of the ring. Each punch was delivered with purpose, not just to score points, but to make a statement about precision overcoming power, about skill transcending brute force. With 1 minute remaining in round 11, Ali trapped Frazier in the corner again. This time, he unleashed a combination that would later be analyzed frame by frame by boxing historians. A jab that snapped Frazier's head back, followed by a right cross that landed flush on the chin, and then, as Frazier's hands dropped to protect his body, a left uppercut that caught him squarely under the chin. Frazier's knees buckled. For a moment, he sagged against the ropes, held up more by the corner post than by his own legs. The referee moved in close, prepared to stop the fight if Frazier couldn't defend himself. In that moment, with the outcome seemingly inevitable, Ali did something unprecedented in championship boxing. He stepped back, with Frazier hurt and vulnerable, with the referee poised to intervene. With the title within his grasp, Muhammad Ali deliberately created distance between himself and his opponent. The garden fell silent, 20,000 spectators collectively holding their breath, unsure of what they were witnessing. Ali stood in the center of the ring, his gloves now raised in the classic defensive position, and waited. Frazier, using the ropes for support, gradually pulled himself upright. Their eyes met across the short distance that separated them, a distance that Ali had chosen to create at the moment of his greatest advantage. The referee looked at both fighters, confusion evident on his face, then signaled for them to continue. Frazier, summoning the legendary heart that had defined his career, pushed off the ropes and moved toward the center of the ring to re-engage. Ali, still waiting, still watching, allowed him to approach. When Frazier was within striking distance, Ali spoke again, this time loudly enough for the first several rows to hear clearly. "I could have ended it, Joe." Remember that. My faith teaches mercy. Then, in a display that would become one of the most talked-about moments in sports history, Ali extended his glove toward Frazier, not to punch, but in a gesture reminiscent of a handshake. The crowd gasped. Frazier, after a moment's hesitation, touched his own glove to Ali's. For the remaining 30 seconds of round 11, the two fighters circled each other, occasionally exchanging jabs, but without the furious intensity that had characterized the earlier rounds. When the bell rang, both men returned to their corners, but the dynamic of the fight had fundamentally changed. In Frazier's corner, Eddie Futch took one look at his fighter's face, now grotesquely swollen, with both eyes nearly closed, and made the decision that would preserve Frazier's dignity and possibly his career. "That's it, Joe," he said, removing Frazier's mouthpiece. "It's over." "I can beat him, Eddie," Frazier protested weakly. "Give me one more round." Futch shook his head firmly. "No one will forget what you've done here today," he said, "but I'm stopping it." As Futch signaled to the referee that Frazier would not come out for round 12, the garden erupted in a mixture of cheers and respectful applause. Across the ring, Ali remained seated on his stool, his expression solemn rather than celebratory. When the referee raised his hand in victory, Ali acknowledged the crowd briefly, then walked directly to Frazier's corner. The two men embraced, their competition transcended by mutual respect. What Ali said to Frazier in that moment wasn't recorded by the microphones, but those who were close enough to hear would later report that it was a simple acknowledgement. "We made history tonight, Joe. Both of us." In the post-fight interview, Howard Cosell pressed Ali about his unusual tactics, particularly his decision to step back when he had Frazier hurt in round 11. "The world saw a different Muhammad Ali tonight," Cosell observed. "You had the opportunity to finish Frazier in that 11th round, but you chose not to. Why?" Ali, his face showing the marks of battle, but his eyes clear and focused, considered the question carefully before responding. "This fight wasn't just about who's the better boxer, Howard. It was about standing up for what you believe, even when the whole world is against you. I didn't need to knock Joe out to prove my point. Sometimes mercy makes a stronger statement than power." The fight would indeed make history, but not just as a sporting event. It became a cultural touchstone, a moment when athletic competition intersected with the deeper currents of American society, race, religion, politics, and the very definition of courage. For Ali, who had been vilified for his conversion to Islam and his stance against the Vietnam War, it represented a form of vindication that no court decision could provide. In the years that followed, as Ali's legal battle reached the Supreme Court and his boxing license was eventually restored, the image of him standing in the center of the ring, allowing a hurt Frazier to recover, would become symbolic of a different kind of strength, one rooted not in the ability to hurt, but in the choice to refrain from hurting when given the opportunity. Joe Frazier, too, would emerge from the fight with his reputation enhanced rather than diminished. His courage in the face of Ali's unexpected strategy and his dignity in defeat added new dimensions to his legacy as a champion. The rivalry between the two men would continue, culminating in two more legendary fights, the rematch at Madison Square Garden in 1974 and the Thriller in Manila in 1975. But neither of those encounters, despite their drama and intensity, would quite capture the singular moment when Muhammad Ali, through both his brilliant boxing and his unexpected mercy, demonstrated that his beliefs were not a source of weakness, as his critics had claimed, but the foundation of a strength that transcended the conventional boundaries of sport.